Hey, it's David Gordon from TheaterMania. It's Friday. I just looked at the date. And I'm going to look again because I never remember. It's Friday, May 22nd. And I'm here with Theresa Rebeck, the great playwright of Seared from this season and Bernhardt Hamlet from last season. God, that was a great play.
Thank you.
That was it. And what Janet McTeer, man.
She is mighty. That was like one of the greater thrills of my entire career.
Yeah,
When that happened, I did have a moment where I thought, I'm the playwright who got to do a play with Alan Rickman on Broadway and now Janet McTeer on Broadway, and I don't know anybody else who got that deal. And I am fully aware of the privilege and the honor and the crazy excitement of watching someone like that do what they do. I mean, it was stunning. I thought I loved the whole production of both those plays, but right
yeah.
now we're talking about Bernard Hamlet, and I thought Moritz did a stunning job, and I loved the set. It was a very exciting time for me, honestly.
Moritz is a genius.
I think so. I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Yeah,
We all think, those of us who have worked with him, we're all like, he's the next one. He is the one for me.
yeah.
I think. I'm always hoping to get back into a production so I can be there with him now. We've done 3 shows together, and he's not just a genius. He's very, very funny, and he's a real thoughtful gentleman. It's very and which turns out to be, over time you come to understand, or at least I've come to understand, that that's what I need. I need people who behave themselves and who are gracious listeners and keep the craziness out of the rehearsal hall. And he's brilliant at that. I do feel like he's kind of the luck that fell on my head at this point in my career. All comes kind of through him.
Do you Well, there are so many things we can talk about just in terms of like you have had Alan Rickman, you've
I
had
have.
Janet Fear, you've had Katie Holmes, you've had Tony
Mhm.
Shalhoub, like you've had so many, you've had Julie White,
Mhm.
uh, and
Norbert Leo Buck.
Leo
I had
Butts.
I got to work with him too. Yep.
Just
Who else? Oh, Raul. We cannot
Raul,
forget
yeah,
Raul Esparza, the great Raul Esparza. Yeah.
just geniuses. What do you like pinch yourself every day that you go into production and you're like seeing Alan Rickman in the rehearsal room?
Well, that was a particular. I had like many people, I had been obsessed with that actor for many, many years, and then we strangely, through very strange circumstances, got to be friends with him, and so there was this enormous awareness of the privilege of being in a relationship with I would have said at the time he was the greatest English speaking actor on planet Earth, and I learned a lot from him, and he could be withering, he could be very, very challenging, but he had a beautiful heart, and he was always so gracious about reading what I was working on and giving me feedback. A lot of the times, the feedback was very mysterious, which I liked as well. Um, and uh, and then he became intrigued by seminar and wanted to do it. So, uh, I, you know, I'm still catching up with the wonder of that sequence of events. He was a great influence in my life. I'm really profoundly thankful to have known him, and I learned a lot from him, and I miss him all the time. We have people who were friends with him. We he it doesn't go away. Like every a couple times a week, I think, oh God, I'd love to know what Alan would say about this, and I know he would be mighty in his rage about what's going on now. He was great. He was like bracing.
Yeah, oh, that was such a fun production. That was
Oh
such a
yes.
fun seminar.
Oh
That
yes.
just yeah,
And everybody. He also, having said that, I did when I wrote that play. I thought, this is what I'll. The whole idea of that play was, I had a lot of my thoughts about writing, and sorry about this.
no,
About writing, and but mostly I thought, I'll write a play about somebody in their 50s who's like really scary, and then it was a teacher of a bunch of feckless 20 somethings, and he'll just like be mean to them, he'll just destroy them, it'll be really funny. I mean, I
Yeah.
was like, that's what it's going to be. And that's what it was. And I felt like the cast, who was, Hamish Linkletter and Hetty Ann Park and Jerry O'Connell and Lily Rabe, that they really caught the spirit of, oh no, like the terror of he's here, and the yearning for him to say something nice, and the like the craziness of we're gonna punch back for a minute, and then afterwards, I mean, it just really worked. And afterwards, every night, that was one of those casts that every night we'd go out and have drinks and have a good laugh. Alan loved martinis. I mean, it was kind of a slightly alcoholic run, but it was, so there was such muscular pleasure in being actors on Broadway, and hanging out with you felt like you were with the cool kids. And it was
Yeah.
fun. It was really great.
Do you sit down and say, like when you were writing Seared, for instance, which is about a temperamental chef who gets a
Yes.
good review in a magazine for one of his dishes and then decides to never make it again, and the fallout from that? Do you like sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a play about like a really temperamental chef, and then do like tons and tons of research on that life, or do you just like, how do you write? That's a terrible question leading to
No,
like the
no, I
question.
understand. I understand the question. You're basically asking how do you come at plays, and
Yeah.
you generally you come at them from different directions. That's a very good question. There was I was thinking about, art and commerce and how the forces of creativity, what happens when they meet uh, capitalism is really. And
Mhm.
then the more I worked on it, the more it became clear to me that the secret subject of the play, for me, was toxic masculinity. Because as much as I love all my characters. I mean, I can't write anybody without like falling in love with every bit of
Yeah.
them. And I loved Harry, and everybody was like, he's a bit of a nightmare, Teresa. And I was like, he's so charming. He's so interesting. I love what he says. And then the more time I spent with it, the more I went, you know what? He's been allowed to run that kitchen like it's his own kingdom. And he's squeezing the reality of his kingdom in such a terrifying way that it was like Mike's life was falling apart, the restaurant was going to fall apart, and that you had to figure out as the play continued, and then you found out that he was squeezing the Rodney who adored him in other unconscionable ways, and I did end up feeling like, okay, now that I understand that this is about toxic masculinity, because the question the play finally asks at the end is, can he come back? Can this be a whole, like, what will happen once we understand that hierarchies can be devastating and can be and like how do you rebuild with a new understanding? And so that's when things, that's how that rewriting part, like for me, a lot of times people, especially because I've worked in TV and film, they always want you to like write everything out ahead of time and tell me what this is going to be, what that's going to be. And I always think, well, if you write a whole bunch of treatments, then the secret subject, the stuff that you don't know that's rolling around in there, it rarely reveals itself because, and that's what I think theater is so beautiful at, is like when you are watching something, and honestly, I didn't make this up. It's something you learn watching a lot of Tennessee Williams, a lot of O'Neill, a lot of Moliere, a lot, like the big classical guys who when I was young, I and going to Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park to see student matinees. It was they were like gods to me. Arthur Miller, a god,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that's kind of what I'm always after in the theater, is something large and muscular and that like swings for the fences, because that's what those guys did. I think that for me is what I understand. That there's other kinds of theater that are more so that are smaller and more intimate, and that's not what I do. So for me, like setting up like a titanic figure or a titanic battle and then seeing what rises out of that is more the process. It really
Yeah.
is the process.
the play, and you'll be able to tell me if I'm completely wrong-headed in this. Oh, and by the way, people watching at home, if you have questions for Theresa about writing or anything, pop them in the comments. We can get to them.
Okay, sure. Ask them if they like my hair. It's a little.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
The play that I feel, or at least my favorite play of yours, is called The Scene, and it's a play that was at Second Stage maybe 10, 12 years ago.
That's one of my favorite ones. Yeah.
And that was another. It was a dream team of performers. It was Tony Shalhoub and Patricia Heaton and Anna Camp before she was anybody famous. And
I discovered her. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the great Christopher Welch.
The late great Chris Welch. Facial expressions in that play I still think about. Love your hair.
Thank you. It's kind of long.
Well, nobody's getting haircuts these days.
I know.
I completely got rid of it all in April.
Yours looks good too. I like yours.
Thank you. Yeah, The Scene, I feel like, is a play about that, where you have these like Titanic characters and this like Titanic overarching idea, and then just like you see the fallout of it.
Yeah, you know, that play, I actually I wrote the first scene of that after I had gone to a real crazy like Soho party with my husband, and we met this girl there who wasn't, I mean, obviously when you write your own characters, but she was sort of like incoherent, and it was also a party where there was just a lot of shit going on. I mean, like, you know, it was one of those parties where after a while you just go, I think I better get out of here, you know, like,
yeah,
and whatever, you know, it was too slick by half. And I went home and I wrote that first scene, and I was like, I think I've lost my mind. Do you know what I mean? I just thought, I'm out of my mind. But I had left it on the counter in the kitchen, and I came into the kitchen after having gone to the Key Food or something. My husband had just read it. It was like 10 pages, and he tapped it and said, I think you got something here. And I thought, do I? And then I sort of crawled forward with that and let every scene be the consequence of the scene before. And some of the scenes in that, I really love that play. Some of the scenes in that, yeah, thank you. I, you know, when we did it at Actors Theater of Louisville with the great Stephen Barker Turner and the great David Wilson Barnes and Anna and the amazing Carla, I can't remember Carla's. It was an amazing cast, and but I felt, I was just like, it was so raw. After one performance, I thought, I don't know what, you know, people loved it, seemed to love it, but you know, you question everything all the time. But I thought that's what I at one point I said to everybody, I feel like I'm out on the end of a limb and I'm completely naked. And I don't know, but this is what I meant. This is what, you know, like I'm constantly looking for a moment when I can look at a play and say, yeah, that's what I meant. That's it. And then I can like release it into the world. But a lot of times you really have to work at making, and sometimes, you know, for me, there's like, you know, you get in the stew with people and people want it to mean something else or to go a different direction. And I'm like, I understand, you just can't do that on the first one. It just has to stand on my shoulders and be what I meant. And then it can mean all sorts. And so a lot of times what other people mean fold into that, which is good. You know, like the great Dylan Baker in Bernhard Hamlet. I had not understood what that character was going to turn into. And then everything he brought in as usual was just stunning and original. And so a lot of times you just go, I don't know what's going to happen. And you have to incorporate all that.
I was going to say, are you the kind of writer that like Albee or someone where the actors have to adhere to, you know, every piece of punctuation, or do you let someone like Dylan Baker come in and like do his thing?
Yeah, I actually am not. I'm not somebody who you have to do. I generally it's a better idea to get very, very, very close. But sometimes you'll write something and you'll watch an actor stumble over it and think that's not important enough to cause that much service over in the corner there. And so generally there are, but if people start taking great liberties, I go, you shouldn't be working with me. My language is very strong, and
Yeah.
let's just honor that's what comes out. And but I don't get all uptight about it. I try not to. There are certain things that obviously are going to be really important to me, and there is a there, because I've worked with several actors over and over and over again, and there is a kind of shape to the monologues that that everybody understands after you've done them a few times, because they tend to be extensive and very discursive, and so there is a sense where you have to never lose the forward motion of it.
Yeah.
And even though it's going to go over there and over there, that there's a constant sense of the muscle that's going kind of through the head and into the heart. So there's a kind of drive and passion, and that you're allowed to take a breath when there's a laugh that's buried around in there.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to stop or be slow or be interior. That just doesn't work.
I feel like Krista Rodriguez really got that in Seared, and she'd done several. She'd done.
Yeah, Krista's a great discovery for me at this moment. Like I really feel lucky that she showed up. I'm like, wow, look at you. Yeah, she's great. Yeah. She's really great.
Are you working on anything now? Like, are you writing anything now, or have you found that this whole period has sort of left you like completely devoid of inspiration?
No, I am working on a play. I actually, before everything sort of came ground to a halt, I have a play that's finished and ready to go. That's going to be at Arena Stage in DC whenever we're ready to go back, and that's called Enlightenment, and it's about witchcraft and the Declaration of Independence. Is really cool. Kind of what it's about. Yeah, I love that, and I'm directing it. And I have a beautiful team of designers, and that's sort of coming together. And I think that probably last I heard from Molly Smith is that we're just going to move it to the fall of next year. But if she has to move things around again, I don't know. But that's going to be there. And right now I'm working on a play. I'm writing a play about it's about death. It's about hospice. It's about somebody stuck at home while his father, his nightmarish father, tortures everybody on the way to the grave. And it's very funny, And actually, I think it's pretty funny. I sometimes you go, why are you doing this? And then I think, well, because it's what I am. I'm a playwright. I'm not. All these people keep saying, Theresa, there's disaster in the air, like there's not going to be any theater for 3 years. And I'm like, well, that's just not true. I have a part of my brain I call the insane optimist. And she's kind of like, she's a little more accurate than you think. I just don't think this is going to end that but it feels more and more, it feels like a kind of necessary pause,
Yeah, I'm certainly heartened by how much theater is being developed online for platforms like this now. I can't say that I'm watching much of it just because I don't enjoy watching things on my screen this way, but I'm the fact that it's happening.
But I've heard something, last night I was talking to a friend of mine who was watching Sally Field and Bryan Cranston do love letters for an Actors Fund benefit, and I was like, that sounds amazing. I mean, I missed it, but it did. I thought, I bet that was amazing. And so I think that there are astonishing things showing up, but I tend to not be able to watch them either. I don't want to spend more time in front of the screen than I have to.
Yeah, I'm going to pop up a question from a viewer who's watching now, which is, Ms. Rebeck, I adore your writing, especially Seminar. As a young actor, I'm often told to create my own work. Many of us hear that, create your own work. I have mixed feelings. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think you should do what feels true to. I really do. I'm like, there's no point in lying to ourselves about any of this, especially because you are your own instrument, And so whatever you want to put out into the world needs to be something that fits you. And it's like, I know some writers, some actors start doing it, but they're not necessarily experienced enough writers. Like, what if your instrument is at a different place? What if your acting instrument is at a different place than your writing instrument? And I just would, if there's something that you love working on that you're self creating, I'd do it. And if not, I'd like find somebody who wants to work on something with you. I mean, my friend Ed Napier right now is, he finally, after years and years and years, wrote an astonishing piece for himself to perform. And he's working with the great Andy Hamburger on it. I mean, there's plenty of people to collaborate with. And sometimes that's what you want to do when you're working. You don't want to just be alone. You want to be in a room with people. So,
Yeah. Are there still boundaries that, beyond the I was going to say the gender divide, but are there what are the boundaries that established playwrights like yourself still face in like the commercial theater industry in New York?
oh, well, I actually do think that gender is still a real issue.
Hmm.
And I'm puzzled about why it
Yeah.
hangs on so much. I I've tried to talk to my male peers about it because there are so many really powerful male producers and who seem like not interested in working with female playwrights. And there was one point when Doug Wright said to me, Doug's a great guy, and it was a very passionate and honest discussion. And he said, "Well, what are the female producers? Why aren't they picking up the slack here?" And I thought, and he said, "I'd like to hear what they're," and I thought, I don't want to hear what they think. I want to
Yeah.
know from like David Stone or Scott Rudin, Jeffrey, all those guys who have been around for a long time. Like, what's the stumbling block? Because there are so many wonderful female theater artists, and it's still one of those situations where if you just count who's doing what, the numbers of women working on Broadway are so much less than the numbers of men working on Broadway. So that's mystifying to me, and I think we should be more concerned about it.
Yeah. Are the Lilies, which is an organization that you were one of the founders of,
Hmm.
are they facing any particular challenges now in terms of fundraising with all that's
You
going on
know,
in the world?
I don't know. I actually, after 5 years, I stepped away, so I'm just not involved with them anymore.
Uh, what Who are the writers that? Oh, this is a good question. This was exactly what I was going to ask, and I'm going to pop it up. Who are some of your favorite female playwrights? Who are your influences?
Oh, my favorite female playwrights.
I was
I
gonna
really, yeah.
say I was gonna ask like who are the young writers that you're really into right now, whose work that you know?
Okay, there's this young writer, Chisa Hutchinson. Do you know Chisa's work?
Yeah,
I think
yeah, yeah,
she's amazing. She's the one I never miss. Like when I can see her and her stuff anywhere. I think she's really funny, very original, and human. And her language is beautiful. So I'm very taken with her work, and uh, it's interesting that the writers who influenced me, I mean, obviously, the female, if you're talking about female playwrights, I would have to say Lillian Hellman. Because I believe in the kind of uh, the muscularity of her storytelling, a lot of, and the fact that it's her plays are about America and
yeah,
or about culture, about history. And the really huge influences on me as a writer would have to be like Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams. Uh, I love O'Neill. I was raised Catholic, and so I'm sort of in and out of like wanting, being so angry with him, and then fascinated by the extensive, I'm still just dazzled by his language and how he does that. Chekhov is I love Chekhov, and I think in terms of how he builds stories. I just think about it all the time, and I read a lot of Shakespeare because I feel like that he had such a. I'm very fascinated by the breadth of his vision, and I feel like right now, so many American writers we're kind of constantly told to keep smushing things down, like one person plays, and I'm like, I'd love to see that change, so that we could all explore the world with more size to the how many inhabitants are up there. One of the
Yeah.
things that I wish would happen, I hope happens with the, as we come back, is that some people are already talking about really minimizing like the technical elements, or and going back to like actors, language, and some lights and costume, and I work with great designers. Alexander Dodge, I think, is really a genius of our time. And I'm interested in reconfiguring the assumptions.
Just going back to hearing the words beyond,
Hmm.
just going back to hearing the words.
Yeah, hearing the words and thinking about the emotional truth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Theresa, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, that's it.
That's
Oh,
it.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
really
Okay.
appreciate it. Have a good Memorial Day weekend.
You too. You
Take
too.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.